Welcome to this segment on our breakfast on KBC English Service. My name is Khainga Okwemba. This is the week when we remember one of the giants of Kenya's liberation as a great nationalist, the late Mboya, who was gunned down. Sometimes as a Kenyan, when you read the history of this country and you see that Mboya died when he was only 39 years old and he had achieved that much, you ask yourself, had Mboya lived today, would Kenya be the Kenya that we know? These are questions that a journalist and editor who is visiting our studio will help us understand as we commemorate this Kenyan nationalist. So Norbert Oluoch, welcome onto our breakfast show.
Thank you very much. Today is a great day. It's a day when we are looking back or taking a step back in time rather to commemorate the life and time of a great man, TJ, as he was popularly known then, or Thomas Joseph Mboya.
Great. So I know you as a journalist, as an editor, you've actually worked with a publishing firm. But when did you first encounter this name, Mboya?
Thank you very much, Mr. Okwemba. Where I come from, right from childhood, because I was born in the 80s. And that was a decade plus after Mboya had left. He had lived, made the impact that he did make, and left. Where I was born, that is in Luo, Nyanza, the presence of Mboya, even in the 80s, after he had exited the world, could be felt. And the embodiment of his presence was manifested on the many photos we could see hanged on the walls. We had photos of Mboya himself. We had photos of his wife Pamela. We had photos of Jaramogi and the whole lot of people who lived in his time. Mm-hmm. But in my childhood, those photos didn't make a lot of sense. So aside from the photos, the other personification of Mboya that we interacted with in our childhood were the names. There are very many people who are named after him. So growing up, we had many Mboyas who were older than our lot. And even among my peers, there were many who were named Mboya. So right from childhood, we were socialized to associate and appreciate the greatness that Mboya brought to the world and to his people.
Great. Now, later on, you'd actually work as an editor with a publishing firm. And it was during that time when you now also tried to interact with the story of this man called Mboya.
Yes. In publishing, my interaction with Mboya's story lies in the books that other people have done on him. Unfortunately, the two very powerful books that I've interacted with are done by foreigners. Caucasians have done a lot of research on Mboya because seemingly they, in my view, appreciated him a lot more than we've ever done or than maybe we'll ever do. So there's a book, first of all, that recounts Mboya's contribution to the growth of the academia. The first generation of scholars in Kenya. The book recounts Mboya's contribution to the 1958 towards 1961, the whole period when we had the Students' Airlift program. Then we also have the other book, Mboya, the Man Kenya Wanted to Forget, which again recounts the contributions of Mboya during his time, both socio, economic and political. So
there's that. What for you is one major contribution of Mboya from your reading of Kenyan history?
Thank you very much once again. From my reading of the life and times of Mboya, his contribution did not only impact one realm of life. Mboya impacted on the economic growth of this country. Similarly, he impacted on the political growth of this country and even social growth. That is where education comes in. But most importantly, looking back from what we've read in book, and by the way, from, let me say, where I come from, Mboya's exploits are well documented even in folk songs. The Benga artists of those days did tribute songs for our people, because even today, if anyone who was born yesterday wanted to know who Mboya was, they would only have to go play particular numbers and they'll get everything. So my greatest appreciation of Mboya's contribution, in my view, lies in his attempt and effort to unite the country. I think during Mboya's time, power, real power, belonged to the people. So a lot of the activities that Mboya participated in, he went back to the people. He rallied people towards unity, as I've said. So we look at his contribution in politics, the political growth, the economic growth, the social growth, and most importantly, without forgetting, he was a trade unionist. So the history of trade unions in this country cannot be complete without a mention of Mboya's contribution.
Now, I want us to wrap up on this, but I would want you to defend his legacy in this manner. That historians tell us that many times after independence, or even prior, just before independence, even though they were in the same party, in the same KANU, him and Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, whom you mentioned earlier, they were also rivals. And many times, his critics would say that most of the time, he would actually be used to fight Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. This was a very brilliant and sharp young guy, but he was also overly ambitious. So there's that criticism against him of fighting Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. That is just number one. His contemporaries also have certain things that they have said about him. He was not the best of friends with nationalists, like, for example, Martin Shikuku. They were always at loggerheads. But what united them was actually what you are saying, fighting for the liberation and for the independence of Kenya. But after that, we had all these squabbles.
Thank you. I will not attempt to defend Mboya. I will read from what history teaches us. It's possible that Mboya and Jaramogi had what I would call political rivalry. It was political, not personal, in my view, because politics is a game of competing interests. And Mboya was a nationalist. Similarly, Jaramogi was a nationalist. But we cannot overlook the fact that the two of them shared the Luo Nyanza constituency. Inasmuch as Mboya was a Nairobi politician, his roots or his heritage automatically put him at loggerheads, politically speaking, with any other person who had got competing interests. So I think the confluence between Jaramogi and Mboya lay in the people. Both of them were pro-socialism. They were pro-people. But the competition between them came up because of what you call over-ambition on Mboya's part. Because Mboya, I think in my view, again, was a presidential material. And it was a threat not only to Jaramogi, but maybe to any other person who had got presidential ambitions. That is why we were taught in history classes. He had to go, regardless of the means. He had to go. He had to be shot dead if they could not catch him any other way. So, yes, that rivalry was there, but let us peg it on political interests, but not at a personal level.
Now, if Tom Mboya had lived walking the streets of Nairobi and seeing what Kenya has become, would he be a happy man? Or let me put it this way. Had Tom Mboya lived, do you imagine the trajectory of this nation would have been different?
Had Tom Mboya lived, many agree, Kenya would have taken a different political, economic, and social path. And looking at that back to back with where we are today, and looking at the question you just posed, Mboya would not be a happy man. Had he lived to see us go the way we've gone, he would not be a happy man. But I have said, and I want to repeat, had he lived, and had he lived his dream, certainly Kenya would not have got to where it is. I believe that would have had a far much better country. Why do I say so? Mm-hmm. I say so because Mboya's ambition of getting as many Kenyans properly educated is as clear as day is from night. And with education, because we say that education is power, education is many things, it's also light, I believe we would have got to a better place than we are today. We would have been more united, in my view, than we are today.
That one is a subject for another day, because some of his contemporaries, there are many Kenyans who are actually writing books today, and a lot of our history is actually coming out. And we've just cited one example of his difference between him and Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, and he said that it was not personal, it was political, and you've situated it very well. But he also had differences with some of his other contemporaries. Now, just before I leave you on that, because we are looking at, had Mboya lived, what would have been the direction of this country? But look at it this way. There's too much that has been said about that 1965 sessional paper number 10. And when you read that paper, the title itself actually says that it's a socialist blueprint. But those ones who've actually analyzed that paper, including the father of the former American president, Barack Obama, who was an economist, he criticized that document. Recently, journalist Tony Mochamo of the Standard newspapers has written a book, Political Parties After Political Parties, The Changing Nature and Reality of Political Power in Kenya. And in that book also, Tony tries to look at that paper, and he says that it was only socialism in name, but in truth it was actually a capitalist blueprint. So much so that this capitalism that we always accuse Jomo Kenyatta of, it was their policy that both Tom Mboya and Jomo Kenyatta were capitalists, whereas Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and the likes of Bildad Kagia were socialists. So in terms of economic path, he could have as well just continued with this capitalist path that Jomo Kenyatta took.
Yeah, I concur with you all the way. Jaramogi was a full-blown socialist, full-blown. But Mboya, looking at the things that people say about him, especially his contemporaries, was blowing hot and cold when it came to the economic position. I think, from what I've seen people write about him, he was pro-hybrid, a hybrid economy, an economy that accommodated both socialism and capitalism. Yeah, so I agree with you that whereas Jaramogi was a true or proper socialist, Mboya was blowing hot and cold. So I won't really put him into any pigeonhole because he cuts both ways. But I think his position was informed by his ambition, political leadership ambition. He was laying ground for his presidency. And I think in the process, ambition might have clouded his vision to some extent, and that might have got him to where he found himself, including rubbing shoulders the wrong way and exiting the stage prematurely. Yeah, so maybe in literature, in a literature class, we could blame Mboya for his fate. Maybe he qualifies to be called a tragic hero. Did he in any way contribute towards what befell him?
So we have a street that is named after him, and you have this statue that was erected by President Mwai Kibaki. So beyond that statue, what is Tom Mboya's legacy? How should Kenyans remember him?
It's unfortunate, Mr. Okwemba, because our country, and it doesn't only begin and end with Mboya, our country is not doing a very admirable job when it comes to the documentation of our history. Yeah, so beyond the statue that we have along Moi Avenue and beyond Tom Mboya Labour College, and now we have the Tom Mboya University, that is a constituent college of Maseno University in Homa Bay, there isn't much. My fear, as someone who loves history, is that going forward, we are going to raise a generation, or generations, if you may, that will not know who Mboya and his contemporaries were and what their contributions to the growth of our nation were. Sad.
Very tragic. It's tragic, and I think that is a question that should also be posed to journalists like ourselves, that if our professors of history are not writing about our history, we journalists who record history as it happens should also be writing her biographies.
Thank you very much.
Asante. How's your host, Khainga Okwemba? It's goodbye for now.